Hi, I'm James McGuire, editor of Datamation, and our topic today is the cost of cloud computing. To talk about that, we've got three great experts. With us is Owen Rogers, analyst with 451 Research. Owen, how are you doing today?
I'm very good, thank you.
Good, and you are based in the UK, correct?
That's right. I'm in the historical city of Bath, which is very dark and wet at the moment.
Fantastic. And you also, I know you have your PhD, right? It's something related to cloud computing. Do you actually have a PhD in cloud computing?
Yeah, so my PhD is actually in the economics of cloud computing. So it was on derivatives, futures, and options used in cloud. So that was a couple of years ago now. So I've been working for 451 for about 18 months.
Fantastic. Also with us is Deirdre Mahone. She's the Chief Marketing Officer of Cloud Cruiser. Hello to you, Deirdre.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here.
And could you give us, the short elevator pitch? What does Cloud Cruiser do for those who don't know?
Cloud Cruiser has a software solution, and we sell it to large enterprises or cloud service providers who are running the business of IT. So hybrid cloud and, in fact, traditional IT as well. So really helping enterprises migrate workloads to cloud and track usage by user and costs. Mm-hmm. So it's all about the money side of managing IT services in a hybrid cloud.
Sounds like there's a market for that. Also with us is Rob Bissett, Senior VP Product Management at Six Fusion. Hello to you, Rob.
How are you today?
Good, good. Are you in North Carolina, South Carolina?
We are, yeah, Raleigh, North Carolina.
And explain to us, remind us, what does Six Fusion do?
So, Six Fusion basically specializes in consumption metering of IT infrastructure, whether it's private, hybrid, or public cloud. The idea to create a standardized way of saying how much computing do I have, how much does it cost me on a per unit basis to produce that, and what can I do to bring that cost on a per unit basis down. So lots of different use cases there, whether it's cost allocation, whether it's infrastructure optimization. But one of the things that we're very focused on right now is creating open markets for IT infrastructure. And that came out recently with our announcement with UCX to launch a commodities market for IT infrastructure for cloud.
Great. So the cost of cloud computing, it seems like there's a natural confusion going on there, and I hope we can clear that up a little bit. I mean, first of all, why is the cost of cloud computing so confusing? And on one hand, we hear a lot about price wars. How low will it go? Amazon and Azure compete with each other on price, but on the other hand, it seems like the cost of IT infrastructure in the cloud era have not gone down. So why is the cost of cloud computing confusing? Owen, what's your sense of that?
So I think a really important thing we have to understand is that the term cloud represents a whole bunch of services. Mm-hmm. We can't just say the cloud is virtual machines. We can't just say it's storage. In this day and age, cloud is a whole industry, it's a whole market of a variety of different services, all measured and used in different ways. So I think that provides some of the initial complexity, because if you're running an application in the cloud, you're not yet using virtual machines. You're also going to see line items for bandwidth, for database, for storage, for all these other components as well. So I think that creates the first initial complexity. And then there's also the complexity in the different methods used by providers in measuring and quantifying how these different services are consumed. And I think together these just make a big confusing mess of cloud pricing.
Mm-hmm. Deirdre, your take? I mean, it seems like there's part of the problem is there is not exactly one unit of what is cloud. It's not like going out and buying a server. But what's your sense on the confusion in cloud computing costs?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with everything Owen just said. It's still nascent, so the adoption of within the enterprise of hybrid cloud, whether it's hosted or public or private, it's still early days, although the speed of adoption is definitely progressing. So I think 2015, as we approach that and into 16, we'll see much faster adoption. However, I think the initial attraction for IT to move to cloud is economically it's much more feasible in the long run. There's the scalability and the speed of getting up and running quicker, provisioning VMs in Azure or Amazon or wherever your choice is. But then I think the sort of when the rubber meets the road, and we actually see a lot of shadow IT as well. It's actually still very real. In a recent survey that we conducted at the Amazon Web Services event, 65% of respondents, of which there's about 300 respondents, said, yeah, we go around the central IT department. So there's adoption, but then there's this stark realization, are we getting exactly what we wanted, depending on the use case and the business value that they felt that they were going to get. And then, before you know it, there's cloud sprawl, and then there's this, hang on a minute, do we have actually visibility into what this forecast and this spend is going to be, not just today, now, but 6-12 months down the road? Mm-hmm. So there's confusion there, and I think that people are, maybe the public cloud wasn't the right move. Maybe we should do something private, internal instead. Maybe that's more economically viable. So I think people are still feeling their way, and as Owen said, trying to find out what the best solution is for their exact needs.
Rob, along the lines of the cloud confusion, do you hear from people like, hey, we thought cloud was going to be cheaper, but it's really not? And what's going on with cloud confusion in your eyes? You
see that a lot, and I think the fundamental issue is one of transparency, and that is that organizations of any size, I mean, SMB has one set of problems, but when you get into large mid-market enterprise customers, there's a very significant lack of transparency under what their internal cost models are. So there's a question of, hey, let's go to the cloud. Cloud's really expensive. Well, what is your internal IT cost? No idea. So that becomes one problem, is the juxtaposition of what are you paying now versus what would you pay in the cloud. The second then simply becomes a lack of transparency around cloud costing. So that is, how do I compare the cost of running XYZ workload across my internal and external venues to make a decision? And what we've discovered, or what we've really seen in the industry, is that these are not fact-based decisions today. These tend to be highly politicized conversations where a CFO or a CIO or a CTO has to choose between the internal IT guy that he's been working with for years and a cloud vendor that he doesn't truly trust. So I think the issue is not necessarily the cost of the cloud or the cost of the internal infrastructure itself, but rather the lack of clarity on what things actually cost, both internal and external, and then the transparency with which the decisions are actually made.
Well, that decision between the long-term IT personnel versus the cloud vendor, the executive doesn't know. I mean, is that strictly a cost versus personal comfort issue going on? I mean, is the lure of the cloud vendor cost alone?
Well, so I think you'll find that everybody's telling CFOs and CIOs they should go to the cloud, right? And cost is a part of it. Geez, it's cheaper. And our friend Joe Wyman at Cloudonomics, one of his laws of Cloudonomics is that it can be more expensive and cheaper all at the same time.
Right.
And that's just based on marginal waste rates. But the, from my perspective, this comes down to the CIO and the CFO is being pushed to the cloud because it's the latest and greatest thing. It's more agile, unlimited scalability, geographic replication, yada, 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 yada. But the CFO and the CIO really has no good sense of their internal cost of operations and their external cost of operations. Effectively, they're being lied to by both sides of the equation, right? Mm-hmm. They know that they're not getting the true story, so they both seem expensive. And there are, I firmly believe, and our evidence bears this out, that there are certain applications and certain levels of scale at which internal operations are more effective, cost-effective, than external operations. Right. The question is which ones and how do you figure it out, right? And that's where we're struggling as an industry.